serve as the structural framework for the functioning of most societies and have a wide range of responsibilities. While there are many types of governments, they are concerned about similar national issues from the economy to education to defense to health. Outside of the government itself, so many other groups influence society. This includes corporations, the media, nonprofits, clinics, lobbying groups, and the people themselves. These groups have a lot of influence, but instead of representing a particular country or state or physical area, they often go beyond borders and represent a set of values or an ideology. As a result, these groups are called non-state actors because they are separate from governments or states. Even though these non-state actors aren't affiliated with, directed by, or funded through the government, they have a lot of power to facilitate change. Keep in mind that a non-state actor in one country may actually be controlled by the government in a different country. However, while non-state actors can be influenced by the government, they still have their own agendas. This can be clearly illustrated through the role played by non-state actors in various social movements. A social movement is when a group of people and/or organizations work towards a common goal. This goal is oriented around social change over a long period of time. Often, the social movement doesn't come from within the government, but rather outside of the government, and this is where the non-state actors come in. Unfortunately, things aren't always straightforward. Sometimes the non-state actor involved is working with the social movement to promote change. Other times, the non-state actor is what the people of a particular social movement are demanding action against. We will look at various examples around the world of both of these cases. Gun control movements typically can be categorized into two overarching groups based on their desired end goal. One category covers gun control reform movements that aim to enact more restrictions on gun ownership and use, typically by advocating for stricter laws and more extensive background checks. The second category includes the movements that counter stricter gun laws and support the freedom of citizens to own, carry, and/or use guns. These two categories of gun control reform movements are often found both within the same country. One movement is typically acting against the status quo, and the other movement is working to preserve the status quo. Many modern gun control movements across the world geared towards increasing restrictions on access to guns were set in motion after extreme acts of violence, such as school shootings, extremist attacks, and massacres. Countries like Australia, the UK, Norway, and Canada all tightened their gun laws directly in relation to such incidents. Other countries like the US and the Czech Republic cite self-defense and/or their constitution as reasons why the right to own a gun should be protected. As a result of the unique circumstances of each country, gun laws look slightly different depending on the nation, and there's still no clear-cut answer as to what is the best solution to limit gun violence. This is in part due to insufficient data on gun violence, but also due to attempts to hold specific countries up as representative examples for the rest of the world. Rather than attempting to make sweeping summary statements about gun control movements across the world, we will look at Japan in detail, a popular example cited in pro-gun control movements, to see what one country's history and experiences can illustrate about maintaining low rates of gun violence. Japan consistently has one of the lowest rates of gun violence in the world, and while it's true that citizens have to go through an extensive training process and background check in order to get a gun, it's not impossible. It's also true that the Japanese police force rarely carry guns, but this is also true in countries like Australia, New Zealand, Iceland, the UK, and Norway that all have higher rates of gun violence. So what is it that really makes Japan unique? While we could trace Japan's anti-gun attitude extremely far back in history, many scholars specifically look towards post-World War II occupation of Japan as a catalyst for Japan's current state where guns are not very present in society. In the aftermath of World War II, Japan remained occupied by Allied forces, largely from the US. The Allied occupation forces were led by General Douglas MacArthur, who led the title of Supreme Commander for the Allied Powers, or the SCAP. The Allied forces exercised a lot of influence over Japanese society in an attempt to rehabilitate the country. One step they took was to demilitarize Japan and ban Japanese citizens from owning guns, forcibly removing guns from the scene. Another step was to limit the use of established martial arts, known as the Budo ban, because martial arts were linked to militaristic and ultra-nationalistic ideology, according to the SCAP. Martial arts institutions were also shut down because the schools had links to the Japanese military. While the Japanese police force was still allowed to carry simple guns, the police was accustomed to using martial arts for various reasons. Japanese police traditionally receive more training in martial arts than they do with firearms. They view using firearms as more cowardly, and Japanese police culture emphasizes harm reduction, even when pursuing a criminal or when acting in self-defense. Therefore, since citizens weren't allowed access to guns, most crimes were being committed with guns, and the Japanese police were hesitant to use disproportionate force. As a result, the Japanese police was very unequipped to deal with the many violent outbreaks that occurred post-war. Finally, in 1947, the Tokyo Police Bureau convened a committee of non-state actors, martial arts experts, to create a new system of self-defense so that Japanese police officers could be more adept at managing violent situations and arrest criminals without using violence themselves. Named Taiho Jutsu, which literally means arresting art in Japanese, this form of self-defense was codified into a manual later that year and was officially published for police officers with great success. The manual was titled The Fundamentals of Taiho Jutsu. While the Budo ban was lifted in 1950, few citizens ended up going through the legal process to own a gun, and this trend of low gun ownership across the board still holds true in the country. While higher rates of illegal firearms began emerging in the mid-1990s, Japan has been able to retain its extremely low crime rate. Today, Japan still teaches Taiho Jutsu to its police force and continues to maintain a culture where gun use is de-emphasized in favor of non-violent arrests using self-defense techniques that don't require firearms. In summary, after World War II, Japan was pushed to use firearms instead of martial arts because of the link between martial arts and the Japanese military. Instead of giving in and changing their philosophy, the Japanese created Taiho Jutsu to bridge these gaps between controlling crime, self-defense, and harm reduction. The police still use this technique, and gun violence in Japan remains extremely low.